Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Capes, the comics talk show where I sit down with other comics creators and we chat about a comic that we both love and what they're working on right now. This week I have with me David Gallaher, and we are talking about Grumble by Rafer Roberts, Mike Norton, Marissa Louise, and Crank. So, David, why don't you introduce yourself to the everyone and tell them what you do?
My name is David Gallaher. I'm a comic book writer and video game writer and game designer. Worked on Ghost Recon. I've current for Ubisoft. I've worked for Marvel. I've worked for DC. Worked on books like Green Lantern. I write a werewolf western series called High Moon, and I write a critically acclaimed young adventure series called The Only Living Girl, which is about the daughter of a mad scientist trying to redeem her father's evil legacy. So I've been working in comics and video games for about 21 years.
That's really cool. That's actually really interesting as well because before you reached out about my neurodiversity stuff that I was doing for gaming, I'd actually already heard of Only Living Girl, but didn't
Oh,
realize it
nice.
was you until I went and looked over at your profile.
Oh, yeah. It's been a lot of fun. Before I worked in comics, I was a special ed teacher and I taught special ed for a long time. And so there was an opportunity and my undergraduate degree at uni is in neuroscience.
Oh,
So I
cool.
was able to apply a lot of that work and a lot of those ideas into like an action packed um, adventure series for kids. And I have a lot of fun doing that. I love working for Marvel and love working for DC. Uh, but the opportunity to do something that was more geared towards the thing that I would want to read at 11,
Yeah.
that was really sort of the selling point for me. I
Yeah.
think there are a lot of people doing great work in superhero comics and in non-superhero comics, which is why we're here. But it was really a fantastic opportunity and something I couldn't miss out on.
Yeah, that's
So it's been a lot of fun, and it's interesting because when I started in comics, a lot of what I'm known for is pioneering digital comics. So I developed like one of the first digital comics ever to be on the iPhone, with Box 13 for Comixology. So it's really interesting that we're talking about Grumble, which I just bought on Comixology, and it feels like everything's sort of going back full circle.
yeah. And then actually, speaking of that as well, for everyone watching, if you haven't read Grumble yet, issue one is free on Comixology right now. So go and check it out. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. And yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean with like being able to write the things that you would like to read as well. It's sort of what I'm trying to do at the moment with a few short things that I'm working on to get practice at sequentials and stuff like that. I think for my own work, I've sort of aimed that I'd like to do covers for Marvel and DC one day.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as doing full on sequentials and stuff like that, I want to work at my own pace on my own stories.
Right, I get that.
Yeah. And so Grumble is a really interesting book. It's kind of a heist story, kind of a gangster story, little bit of a redemption arc element to it, but it's very much a supernatural tale. Um, and with bits of UFOs and space in it too.
Yeah, in a way, it kind of reminds me of a magical version of Fargo,
See, I haven't watched a lot of Fargo, so I, I'm not sure about that myself. But from things that
or
I've heard from people,
or like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. In a way, it feels very much like part was it
yes,
yeah part it's not Matthew Vaughn, it's Guy Ritchie, part
yeah,
Guy Ritchie film, part Hellblazer.
yeah,
It's got a very British sensibility about it, and for people who don't aren't familiar with Grumble, primarily focuses on this like low rent hustler grifter named Eddie, who has really been doing everything he can to sort of avoid uh, the gangs he is summarily started to piss off and law enforcement. Um, and he's just basically using magic to get by. When the story opens, it's set in Charm City in Baltimore, and it's really interesting to sort of watch organically as Eddie's life gets radically turned upside down by two very important things. One is the introduction of his possible daughter, and
Yeah.
and then the other. So that sort of like is one of the instigating instances, and then the other one, of course, is that he's turned into a pug dog.
Yeah. Yep. And with weird little grubby, stumpy hands.
Yeah, he looks like in a lot of ways he looks like a naughty dog that's gonna like one of those Hanna-Barbera dogs that would piss off Tom and Jerry. That would like that bulldog would like
Yep.
roll up his sleeves and be like, "All right, Tom, you had it coming." You
Yep.
know, I do love that. It's kind of like if Nick Fury were a dog and chomping cigars. That's kind of what I think about with Eddie. And I think he's got a voice like this. You know, he kind of
Yeah,
talks like the
that's
thing.
sort of how I picture him too. Um,
You know,
and yeah, you were spot on with the whole Guy Ritchie thing. It's the way I sort of see it is. Have you watched Grimm?
I have watched Grimm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Lock, Stock meets Grimm,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
Snatch. Snatch meets Grimm.
Yeah, and that's what I like is the story moves really really fast. And Tala is Eddie's long lost daughter, but she's got a secret of her own. And I think that it's very interesting to watch all this stuff. I'm talking a lot, but it's very interesting to watch how all of these things sort of create this this chain reaction that sort of drives the story forward.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm just on the credits page now. It's got that up in front of us. So I'm not too familiar with Rafer Roberts' work outside of this, but you are. What else has Rafer done?
Rafer did a independent book series about 20 years ago called Plastic Farm, which is very much in the style of I don't know if it's in the style of, but it's got this very like outsider art kind of look and feel to it, the way that you might imagine like R. Crumb does, and it's about a guy who slowly descends into madness. It's a really fantastic series. I think there were 6 issues, and I remember Rafer putting them out, you know, throughout the early aughts. So that was really really interesting to read and be a part of. And then I know that when he and Justin Jordan worked on a Dark Side Thanos comic book about them getting coffee, sort of like
Oh, I think I've
villains
seen
and
that one.
coffees. Yeah, about villains and basically the comedians in cars getting
Yep.
coffee. It's like that version, but once he collaborated with Justin Jordan, I think he got a lot of. He really sort of got a little notorious, and started and ended up working for Valiant. And I think that those things really sort of helped Rafer break out a bit and really become sort of the superstar talent that
That's
I've always
probably
thought he
where I know the
was.
name from because I used to read a lot of Valiant when I was younger, and then they disappeared for a while. And then when I found out that they were starting to make comics again, it was like the happiest day of my life because I loved Shadow Man since I was 12.
Right,
And I've read. I sort of lost the thread a little bit once they started doing a lot of crossover stories again. Um,
right,
but I had read a lot of the new Valiant stuff, so I've probably seen the name there because I
right.
tend to forget who wrote what until I look at it again. But that's probably where because when I saw the name outside of Grumble, I was like, I recognize this writer's name. I can't remember what I've read of his, but I know I've read something, and that's probably it.
Right. Yeah, so I'm really familiar with Rafer's work, and I've known Mike's work going on for about the same time in the late '90s, early aughts. I remember, or even mid '90s. I remember him working on The Waiting Place with Sean McKeever, and really loving his work then. And I think Mike is just a tremendous talent, and obviously. he worked on Battle Pug, which has won Harvey Awards,
Yeah, I
and got
love Battle
tons
Pug.
of
That's
other.
how I found Mike.
Right, and I think that love of Battle Pug easily translates to what you see in Grumble, which is this kind of this love of pugs, and this kind of really out there take. This is something that you could easily see as like an R-rated buddy cop
Yes.
TV show, or something you might see like on a maybe toned down a little, because there's some cussing in this, but maybe a toned down version of it on the CW. It's got that very high concept, like, here's my talking bulldog. Hey, I'm your dad. Shut up. Like I love that, and I love we can get into it. So let's. I've been talking a lot. I have a lot to say about this comic.
It is really good. I'll just quickly brush onto Marissa and Crank before we leave as well. Is that, like, Marissa is the color artist, obviously, and I love Marissa's coloring work. Anything that I see Marissa post that she's working on, I will go and check out because it's always so vibrant.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot here with how she uses colors to really sort of push the story forward. I don't feel like anything that she's doing is overpowering. I feel like she knows how to use color to push characters forward or push crowd scenes back. Everything about her work reminds me of what I loved about comics in the early 90s, which was this idea that you could use color to make characters pop off of pages and not make everything so over rendered that it feels like a movie.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here, Marissa's really using color to create a really nice, beautiful tapestry for the book. Nothing feels muted. It doesn't feel like a 90s Vertigo book where everybody's just like really muted colors and silhouettes. No, here is this really rambunctious comic series that uses color to its full extent to tell the story.
Yeah, that's right. Even here on this first page, like it's an evening nighttime scene, so the colors are a little more muted than most others, but the characters themselves are all still really vibrant. And on that second panel, there's just that not quite solid blue background. It's a very subtle gradient, and the characters stand right out. I actually didn't notice until I looked closer just then that it is a very subtle gradient from the edges.
Yeah, and I'm actually opening this up right now, and that's actually what's really important is they're able to really use Marissa's really able to use the colors in a way that spotlights what's important. Even on these first and second pages, you really get things are dark, but still she's able to knock out color when it needs to be knocked out and lay it in a way that nothing blends. She's this first page, for people who don't know, is Tala outside of Ham's bar, and she's talking to a bouncer. And even though normally in another comic, the bartender, or not the bartender, the bouncer would be colored in a very realistic way. Here, Marissa's using the color from the sky in a way to tint the bouncer's look. So everything feels very naturalistic, and she's able to use warm colors and cool colors in a way that really sort of complements everything. There's never a time where I feel like the artwork is overpowered by the coloring. I think she just does an exceptional job.
Yeah, and of course, Crank's lettering looks fabulous as well. It really suits the tone of the comic.
I think that's really nice. I generally don't care for sort of this more cartoony look for lettering. I do think it's appropriate sometimes. But here, what I like is that Crank is making it feel like it's almost like Tala's journal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Rather than, because I think that these sort of, I prefer sans serif fonts that just for legibility.
Yeah.
But here, there was something about this that really sort of spoke to the narrative that we were getting in the story. So while it's generally not my preferred type of lettering, it really sort of fit the style here a lot, and really sort of added to the story rather than taking away from it. And so there just shows that there's an exception to every rule. Sometimes somebody can use a font or a typeface that you don't care for in the right way to sell it, and Crank really does that here.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's it. Like I'm much the same. I often prefer the sans serif, like fairly easy to read fonts, but yeah, this sort of hand written look really suits the tone and the narration that this book has.
Right, exactly. So and then when Tally gets into the bar, we're going from all those cool colors to these warm colors again, and it's a really really nice. It's really nice change. I really love the sort of not naturalistic, because that's not right the word I want, but this level of verisimilitude in different skin tones and in different outfits. Uh, Marissa's still able to push Tala's look forward because of the wardrobe that she gave her to wear. So there's a lot to be said for that, and I really do think that these opening pages in particular are really really fantastic, and really do the series a lot of justice.
Yeah, no, it really does. Exactly right. And I like how immediately here we're introduced to some of the more supernatural elements, but in such a casual way that it's not really supposed to be. Like, you've almost got to do a double take and go, oh no, that is a chameleon dude sitting at the bar.
Right, and what's interesting too is that it reminds me a little bit of the Mos Eisley Cantina
Yeah.
from Star Wars. She comes in, and we already know from the moment she steps in that this is going to be a vile den of villainy and scummery. Scum and villainy, or we just know that, and we get to that like really on page 2. So we already know that we're into to something very different for this narrative.
Yeah, no, and that's it. And then you get to like the was it third page, and
Yeah.
immediately there's Imp sitting at the table, this little
Mm-hmm.
goblin dude, and this guy with eyeballs just all over his head and green skin, and you know that things are starting to get weird. You're not sure exactly what you're in for, but things are getting weird.
Yeah, and when Tala sort of stumbles onto Eddie in the midst of like all of his little shenanigans, I think that that's when the story really, really, really pushes forward.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, all of a sudden everything starts getting a lot more energetic and crazy and fast paced, and you can almost hear the bass riff and everything starting to happen at the of a chase scene from the Guy Ritchie movies.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying here is that we get enough of Tala's whole spiel right in this introduction. These couple of pages sort of give us enough weight to be interested in who she is and enough of her personality. But yeah, the moment she stumbles onto Eddie, it is. It's like, oh, we got the guns, or oh, we got the jewels we ended up with.
Yeah.
So it's it's really fascinating. So let's talk about rather than going like page by page through the story, let's talk about the characters. Is there a character in this you like the most? Are you more a fan of Eddie or Tala? Give me
Um,
a
I like both almost equally for different reasons. Eddie is obviously really entertaining.
mm-hmm.
He's fun to watch. He's funny. He's also incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. He seems like for me he seems like that guy in uni who doesn't have his life together. And
Yes.
every once in a while will be like really, really fun at parties. But also he's the guy who's like, oh man, did you throw up in my trash can? Like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, man. Or the guy who doesn't give you back your DVD player, or
Yep.
the guy who like wrecks your car. He's like when you think you can trust him, and you're like, oh yeah, I can trust him, whatever, is like the moment he does the dumbest thing. And it's like the people who ask you for advice. They're like, David, can you give me some advice? I want to do this thing. And you'd be like, well, I wouldn't. My advice is don't do that thing. And then they do it anyway.
Yep.
That's Eddie. He's literally like, he asks your advice in a way to tell you that he's going to do something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's not asking for advice. He's asking for permission.
Yeah, exactly. But he couches it in this very like, hey, is it okay if I whatever?
Yeah.
And that to me is really interesting. I really like Tala. I think that her sort of being on the down low with her magic initially when we see her is what makes her very interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
She doesn't want to give it away too much.
Right. She's basically got these sort of demonic powers. And what I find interesting about her is like, whereas she is like a screwdriver and very precise. And Eddie is like trying to like open a jar open a bottle with a hammer.
Yeah.
Like, she can as a screwdriver, she can just pop up the lid, whatever, and Eddie just smashes it open. You know what I mean? Like, they're just two radically different approaches. I do think that she's. I do love the way that she's drawn. I think it creates a really expressive look and feel. I do think that she's sometimes a little too snide for her own good.
Yeah.
So I think that of the two characters, I mean, obviously they're great together, but I love the way that I love her as a character. Yeah. Like, I would have had a total crush on her were I 20.
I'd be like,
oh my God.
I would read a book that's just her.
Yeah.
So I don't think I could read a book that was just Eddie.
Yeah.
He would get on my nerves because he never learns. Or if he learns, it's like one lesson learned and 5 lessons forgotten.
Right. Well, I do think that's what makes this series so interesting. In a way, it is like a road trip of pure chaos. Because Eddie, in his avoidance to sort of pay for what he's done to other people, transforms himself. I don't want to give too many of the plot points away, but in a daring escape attempt, transforms himself into a pug.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, and the way that Eddie uses magic as well, it also reminds me, like, Tala seems more like she's a very experienced and fully trained cocktail bartender. And Eddie is that guy at the party who made punch out of whatever the hell he could find left in the fridge.
Right.
He's like, this a little bit of this, and oh yeah, I've got some vodka here, that'll go with milk.
And that might make for a really great drink once. But trying to re-put that together in any sort of really cognitive way, it reminds me of, like, in a way, if Tom Waits were a magic user.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, I remember back in like 75, I had some gasoline, not that premium stuff that they put in that shit these days. No, some leaded gasoline, and then I added a light spell and a little bit of mojo from the Madame LaVey woman down in New Orleans, and we had ourselves a grand old time. Like, that's kind of what I think about when I think about Eddie.
Yeah, and he's the guy who doesn't sniff the Chinese food left in his fridge before he eats it.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. So it makes for a really, really interesting story. And I'm really, it's interesting to go from this place of knowing Rafer for years, to see what he'd done with Plastic Farm, and then bring some of that sensibility here, because everything here feels outlandish and a little bit odd. because it's Grumble is not your typical like Hellblazer kind of story. The monsters get weirder. The story gets weirder. It does feel like a Tom Waits song on acid with a little bit of magic. It is so over the top that I really, really love it. And I think that Mike Norton really sort of complements that in so many different ways. I mean, they start their story in Charm City, but then they go fucking everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They go all over the place. And, like, I've got the page up where Eddie turns into a pug. And just looking at that again is like, I am so jealous of Mike's ability to, one, draw dogs, two, draw humanoid dogs, and three, draw humanoid dogs with expressions on their faces that actually look like what they're supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, in two frames here, you've got Eddie standing there looking real proud of himself, and you can see that smugness all over the pug face.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too because the editor on the series is Alejandro Albano, who I actually drink with. Like we're like more or less neighbors, so we're always like drinking together at the same bar here in Brooklyn called Hinterlands. So it's really interesting to see him, to see Alejandro, who I've known for a couple of years, to bring this sensibility to editing. I mean, these books are just so incredibly sharp. You can see how he's able to really manage the talent in a way that sort of brings just these incredible ideas forward.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's all put together just so well, you know?
Yeah. And I think that it's really interesting because I look at like how the characters are so different too. Like as they go from like Baltimore to Philly to California, it all becomes very. I mean, they're going to Memphis later.
Yeah.
No, I think that they really take an incredible opportunity to just tell a really robust, very vivid story. What was your favorite moment from the first issue?
It's a hard choice. One of them, which I have up right now actually, is the first moment we see the Cetera.
Oh yeah,
when it pops out of that old lady's face.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
that was really cool. That and the whole sort of sequence from there.
I really love watching Eddie sort of transform going down
Yeah.
Pratt Street in Baltimore and transforming into the dog. That to me was like, that really sold it for me.
That I did love that page. That poof and then proud, smug little pug just standing there with his hands on his hips.
Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said for that because he does it without any sense of shame.
Yeah.
He just totally is into that. And it's really a fantastic moment. And for me, even though we got to see Tala and Eddie earlier, and that does sort of set the story up, the story for me didn't really begin until that moment. Yeah. That's the peak moment.
It was sort of preamble before that moment. Especially with like the cover showing them together. You knew as soon as you saw that pug, you're like, oh shit, okay, that's what this book is about.
Well, it's interesting too because in a way this also feels like a really interesting change in the dynamic. So, obviously Eddie is Tala's dad, right? And a dad is supposed to protect and love his daughter. But now Tala's responsible for protecting and loving Eddie. The relationship changes.
Yeah.
Now she's responsible for him because he's a dog.
Yep.
And I mean, in a way, it's literally kind of like it goes from like this lone wolf and cub kind of relationship to cub and lone wolf.
Yeah.
Like she's literally he's literally the dog. It really plays against what you expect the series to be. She's now the youngest, is now in charge of the oldest.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And in a way, too, it reminds me a little bit of, not the same way, but kind of a little bit like the movie Logan.
Yeah.
You know, because for a while, Logan was the tough, rumbly one. You know, and now anyway, the change in the relationship, the change in that father-daughter relationship, I think is really what's really important and keeps the story feeling really fresh, like it's really playing against formula.
Yeah, exactly. And my actual favorite moment in the series, I can't remember what issue it's in, but I think it's like issue 5 or 6. It's when they are trying to get Eddie's stuff out of storage. Like not the first time when they find that his stuff has been sold, but when they actually go and find Jimmy the Keeper.
Yeah.
This is getting into spoiler territory for anybody else who hasn't read it yet. So if you don't want to know about future issues, come back and watch the rest of this after you've read it. But for me, it has one of my favorite visual jokes ever, and I don't know whether Rafer thought of this independently of the D&D community sharing this meme, or if it's like an homage to that, or if the meme is an homage to Rafer's joke here. But when they were talking about, getting into the warehouse and finding Jimmy the Keeper, and then all of a sudden they've got Jimmy the Keeper out in the woods and the full moon hits. And there's that grotesque sequence of Jimmy actually transforming into a fucking house.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually do the warehouse joke. I lost it. I laughed for a good couple of minutes over that. It just tickled me so much.
Yeah, and there's a yes, exactly. I love that. When I used to play Dungeons and Dragons years ago, and back in like early '90s, I had a character who was a Werverine. So he was a normal person, but they would transform into Logan from the X-Men. So I was like, hey, what would that be? Yeah. So, but yeah, I totally get it. I thought that joke totally reminded me of that, and I do love there's a level of just over the top ludicrous humor that I really appreciate when it comes to this book. In a way, too, it reminds me a little bit of Sam and Max, which I don't know if you read over there. It's a Steve Purcell book.
I know of Sam and Max, but I haven't read it.
They're kind of metaphysical. Metaphysical is not really the right word, but they're kind of off the deep end, kind of they're a dog and a rabbit, and they solve crimes. They're freelance police, and the humor in Grumble really reminds me of that kind of. I mean, it's pulled back a bit, but I always feel like there's a joke every other panel with Grumble, and I love that because it feels like it really truly comes from the characters.
Yep. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean, and it's so fast paced, and they're like, even on the same page, it'll go from something really graphic and holy crap to something really goofy and amazing and really funny 2 panels later.
Yeah, and I love that. It's interesting knowing Rafer and knowing Mike, and I don't really think of myself as a very funny writer, but man, knowing Rafer is like doesn't take anything really seriously. I mean, like he's a really funny guy, and you can really see that in this work. So I really come to appreciate Grumble for all of its over the topness. It's just a really fun, really engaging story that I feel like 10 years ago, I feel could have only been done in comics. But now with all the changes in like CGI technology, this could easily be a show on Sci-Fi Channel or
Yeah.
a Netflix show. Um, and I do love that aspect of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. I would love to see. I don't know if I'd prefer an animated series or a live action series, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it could work. It could work really, really well in something like Adult Swim. You
Yeah.
know, um, and I do love all the people that Tala and Eddie sort of piss off along the way in the series. Like Arachne Fang, I think is her name, right?
Yep.
So it really becomes a deeply emotionally charged kind of action-packed series because I do feel like the relationship between these two characters is really what ultimately drives the story forward. And whether or not they're able to ultimately find any degree of redemption and reconciliation.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's hard, even in the new series, uh, Eddie is still struggling with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to
Yeah,
talk
well,
too much about that because I know you haven't read it, but
yeah,
even with that, Eddie is still struggling to grow the fuck up.
right. Well, and being a parent is hard. I mean, I'm not, but I've worked with a lot of parents. Um, but being a parent is hard work, and how you change and affect your children matters, and not being there for the moments like he wasn't there for Chala. Like all that stuff is hard, and coming to terms with your own failures is hard when you're really in that point of being like, okay, I'm going to change, and I'm going to do the work, do the hard emotional work that's required. I mean, it's hard. It's not an easy snap your fingers and it's fixed kind of thing. Like there's a lot of toxicity in well, I mean, being human. It's toxic to be human, but it's really interesting to watch Eddie really try to redeem himself and really try to make really try to overcome his more animal based instincts.
Yeah.
So it's really a fantastic series. I'm so glad that we're talking about it for the show because it does, I think, requires, I think it deserves a lot of attention. I think there's 2 trades out,
Yeah, I think that's right.
and then the new series, obviously, which is Memphis and Beyond the Infinite.
Yeah. And I think that one is. I think that's almost over now. I think it was going to be 5 issues or something. I'm not sure about that, but I just remember sort of reading something about it being a mini run to finish off the story.
Yeah. Um, but ultimately, it was, I think, really, really good. I think the it's something that I think really deserves a lot of attention, and the series has just a tremendous amount of promise and feel.
Yeah.
This is something that could easily have been at home in a 1990s, mid 90s Vertigo run.
Yes, yes, I agree completely. It definitely would have fit that Vertigo
Yeah,
theme.
something like Goddess or Bloody Mary. This fits right in with that.
Yeah, yeah, I do miss the older Vertigo titles.
Yeah,
There were a lot of good stories being told. But
yeah. I mean,
it's really nice that people are just still doing their own thing now, and there's so much opportunity for people to publish their own stories that they don't have to wait and find something like a Vertigo imprint to do it anymore.
right. No, it's really fantastic. So I'm really glad that we took the time to talk about the series, and I'm really interested in taking a look at the new miniseries, Memphis and Beyond the Infinite, um, which I think there are a couple of issues out now. So I'll definitely check it out because I remember when Grumble was solicited, I was really into it. And being on the show really gave me an opportunity to review all the issues and read the series. And I'm really glad that I did because I remember how much I enjoyed that first issue,
Yeah.
I'm really happy at just the amount of talent that's in this book and the amount of um, emotional weight that's in it.
Yeah, the same. And that's it. It is. It's like it's a riot. It's absolutely hilarious and it's a mile a minute, but it is also really emotional and there's a lot of weight to it as well as things are revealed and Eddie's issues and the fact that he's done a lot of really shitty things. He's not just kind of a loser. He has done some really heinous stuff in the spirit of self-preservation and self-interest.
Yeah,
Um, it's a really solid story, and also just again, as we mentioned at the start, the combination of Mike Norton and Marissa Louise is fantastic, and I want to see more of that.
yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Like,
And I'd love to see another collaboration between Rafer and Mike. I mean, I
yeah,
thought this was really just an outstanding read. And like I said, I'm really glad. I'm really glad that there's more to it to read.
yep, same. It's like it's really inspiring me at the moment to try to come up with an idea that I could pitch to Mike and Marissa and see if I can work something out because I would love to write something with their art attached to it.
Right, right. I get that.
Yeah, because it's just so much fun.
Well, it's interesting too because I think that these themes are really important themes. It's really challenging whenever you're trying to ask for forgiveness or you're trying to reconcile because I think all of us, none of us are perfect, and all of us make mistakes. And I think that this really, in a way, shows us how we can sort of come to the place where we can make amends for the things we've done, to find forgiveness, to apologize, to learn what it's like to be human. This is a really great opportunity. I think this series is a great opportunity to sort of get us to this place where we can all sort of process our own toxic backgrounds and learn from each other. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's it, and it does. It's like it shows that Eddie is not a great guy, but he's also
He's
not.
not irredeemable.
Yeah, to paraphrase Wreck It Ralph, just because Eddie is bad guy does not mean he is bad guy.
Right.
And
That's right. You're absolutely right.
he's made a lot of bad choices, but if he starts and continues to make better ones,
Right.
and also I love as the series goes on, and you can sort of see some of it hinted at in the cover, as it starts to get interdimensional and weird, and you realize that not all of these things are magical creatures; they're like interdimensional aliens as well.
Right. Well, I love when they go to Old Town. And I do think that Old Town really helps sell some of the more unique aspects of the series. I think that's in what, issue two?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, or even when they go to Philly and we get to see those interesting like nursing home wheelchair races. There's a lot of fun, silly little bits that I think humanize the story quite a bit.
yeah. No, and that's it. There's so many small moments that really bring that human weight to it, and also to the aliens. There are a lot of
Yeah.
moments where they are shown that they're not just random aliens that are gonna eat people or any weird stuff like that. Like they're all people with their own lives and their own families, and
Yeah, and I think that's just a tremendous, tremendous thing that they've done on the stories. That nobody really feels like all a bad person. Everybody feels at least that they have one or two additional narrative layers that sort of help convey more of their motivation and their drive.
yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Even when we see what is it, Tala's mom, like that whole situation when Tala's going through the photo album, I thought that was just so powerful.
Yes, yeah, no, no, that was really nice. And in Memphis, you get to see a bit more of her story of her and Eddie as well.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's good. I love that. So I'll definitely check that out. So, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun to talk about the series.
Yeah, no, I really
like I said, yeah, it's really, I think, really powerful and really deserves a lot more people talking about it.
no, I agree. I really love this series, and I've recommended it to a lot of people, and I'm probably going to go on the warpath sharing it again after this, because yeah, more people should read this, and I think it's really a really good story that I'm going to be sad to see end, but I'm also really glad that it's one of those series that's going to wrap up instead of continuing on for too long.
Right. Yeah,
Because
I think that it's got a very, I mean this in the nicest way, but I think it's got a very finite path in
yeah,
terms of where we get to these characters' story arcs. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
yeah, and like I like stories like that. I like stories where you can't see exactly how it's going to end, but you can see that it is building to a very definitive finish point, and
Right.
it gives you something to look forward to. Like you want to know what that finish point is.
Right.
Yeah, which is actually one of the reasons why I decided to do the show and talk about these independent books, because a lot of them are like that. Unlike, all the big superhero books, which have to be ongoing and have to keep coming up with new adventures all the time.
Well, in part to keep those trademarks alive, to keep the copyrights alive. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
some of it is very much a capitalist drive.
Exactly. But yeah, these sort of stories can be one and done, so to speak.
Right.
Like, I've got a story to tell, I'm going to tell it, and then I'm going to move on and tell another story. But this story is going to be rich and whole and complete. And as it
Right.
develops, the reader really gets to look forward to that ending instead of wondering if it's ever going to end and if everything's going to be resolved. You can feel that resolution coming, and it builds anticipation.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm really, and that's sort of actually how I put my stories together when I'm working my stuff. Is that I really believe that comics should have that really nice beginning, middle, and end. So when I worked on High Moon for DC Comics, it definitely had a very beginning, like a very thorough, thoughtful idea of how the story would progress and how it would end. Sometimes it's nice to just have the ending already in mind. And I think Mike and Rafer already have that ending in mind for Grumble.
Yeah.
So it'd be very interesting to see where they get to with that.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And this book, especially for me, is goals as far as reading and learning from the way they draw the story.
Mm-hmm.
Because just before I found Battle Pug, I was writing what I want to be a graphic novel for the future, and I've put it on the shelf because I haven't finished anything yet, and I'm like, no, I need to do smaller stories. As you know, they always say, don't make your big thing your first project.
Right.
And I made the mistake of writing this book because I had an idea for a really fun story, and then as I decided to do some concept work, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I have never drawn a dog,
Right.
and the main character is an anthropomorphic pug. And I'd already written so much like story outline and world building ideas and stuff, not the book itself. And I was like, oh crap, I've really messed myself up.
Right.
And yeah,
Well, I mean, but some of that stuff really just some of that stuff just really comes out naturally. You know what I mean?
yeah,
After you continue to work and work and work on this stuff, I do think it eventually, um, even the best ideas require some massaging.
yeah,
So I
exactly.
definitely see that.
Yeah, so I was really stoked when I came across Mike's work because I'm like, this is brilliant. This is beautiful work drawing these animals and creatures.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot to learn. If anyone's watching wants to draw humanoid animals, as you can see on the cover here with Simon in the background and Eddie in the front there are some really great examples of animals with different types of humanoid bodies too.
Right. No, I do think that there's a lot. to be said for the sort of the way in which the animals and all the different sizes and shapes that they end up using in the story to really convey not just emotion but texture and tone and shape. I think it's really a splendid look at making sure that things feel visually different. The visual vocabulary they use in this book is just outstanding.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah. There's just so much to be said about it. You could write an essay on this book
Yeah, you
easily
could.
because there's so many examples of so many amazing storytelling elements to it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, but it's been a lot of fun just
Yeah, thank
being
you.
on the show and talking about the book. No problem. I mean, I really enjoy looking at this. I'm gonna, when this podcast is over, I'm going to go and check out um, Memphis and the Beyond the Infinite.
Yeah, I think you got about 4 issues that you can
Right,
grab.
right.
So
There you go. So that makes it easy.
yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you very much for joining me today. If you want to let people know where they can find you on the internet.
All right. I'm at davidgallaher.com. It's DavidGallaher.com. Ghost Recon, which are for Ubisoft's available at ubisoft.com, where you can pick it up on Amazon for the Xbox or PlayStation. My book, The Only Living Girl and The Only Living Boy, are available at any of your fine local comic shops or online bookstores. And then you can find me on Twitter at David Gallaher. And I'm approachable and easy to talk to.
It sure is. It's really nice to just chat with David over the last few months and then organize this show. I'm really looking forward to checking out more of your gaming work as well, as I design content for D&D and I've got board games of my own in the works. So I am looking forward to exploring that more now that I've finished my course and I have time to put into my games.
Yeah, man, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show.
You're welcome. I will link all of your links in the description. So for anyone that wants to click through, David's links will be there, as will my own. And I am Sean Sunday. You can find me under Sean Sunday Art on all social media. If you head to the link tree on my bio on Twitter and Instagram, you can find my Discords. And tune in next week for 2 more episodes. You get another week of double episodes next week with Derek Robertson and DB Andry. And I know that with DB we'll be talking about Crowded, and Derek remains to be announced, so stay tuned for that. So thank you everyone for watching. Like, subscribe, do all the usual things. Follow both of us on social media and go check out David's comics. And we'll see you next week.